Hello, welcome to another daily lessons. Now, today I want to talk about Bitcoins. What's up with Bitcoins? I want to talk about it because I took a Uber ride yesterday, and it happened actually more than once already. So I start chatting up with the driver. So whenever I tell people I trade currencies, really pretty much nowadays the first thing come up with, do you play with Bitcoins? Are you buying Bitcoins? What's up with Bitcoins? And it just remind me that Warren Buffett once said that when you start hearing taxi driver to give you a stock tip, is the time that the market is about to crash. Now, of course, that doesn't mean Bitcoin will crash. That doesn't mean it's gonna crash tomorrow. On the contrary, there's a lot of Bitcoin believer out there. So the biggest question is Bitcoin a bubble? Is Bitcoin a bubble? Now, to answer that question, let's take a look at the history. Okay, there's one book I really recommend if you're interested in this topic. It's called Mania Panic, something like that. Let's see if I can find it. Google. Yeah, here. So it's a very good book. It's a little bit outdated. Well, 2005, that's how we are in the digital age. Everything about 5 years ago, it's a little bit outdated. But it's not really that long ago. So it's a pretty good book talking about the history of the financial crisis. Now, if you want to just quickly see the history of bubbles, it's funny, it's bubble tea here. History of bubbles. And you go to Google image, you will see a lot of chart. Okay. Now, of course, the most famous one is the tulip in Dutch in 1637, the tulip manias. Now, I don't know if you can see clearly, but this is how the bubble looks like. Okay. This kind of very steep uptrend followed by a crash. Now, of course, after 2020, you have the South Sea Company big bubble. Now, this was a famous one because Sir Newton, Isaac Newton, which people consider one of the smartest genius in the world, definitely a very, very smart guy, actually got caught up and lost a lot of his fortunes. Now, it just shows you that sometimes the smartest person is not necessarily the best investors or traders, because trading or investing takes common sense. It takes common sense, and in order to succeed in a financial market, your psychology and emotional stableness is way much important than your intelligence, and that's completely and honest true. So this is a very famous case, South Sea Company. Then, of course, you have the big crash in Dow Jones back in 1921 to 1932. And, of course, let's see if we have something. 2008, you also have the financial. Is this the one? No, that's the 86 one. Let's see if we can find something else. Okay, the world of history. Okay, there's even more Japanese equity bubble happened in the 80s. Tech bubble, many of you probably don't know because you're too young, but in the 1999 to 2000, there was a huge tech bubbles. And of course, people will always remember what happened to the 2008 financial crisis. Let's see if we can have that. Financial crisis chart. The subprime mortgage crisis. Okay, that's the correct name. So that was a 2008 financial crisis. Okay, so you probably already see a similar pattern. You have a very steep uptrend followed by the big crash. Okay, that's just the technical part. In terms of the fundamental or even the sentiment of the market, of course, like Warren Buffett says, when everybody is talking about an asset class, that means everybody is rushing to buy. Then you have to ask yourself, who is left to buy more, right? I never say that you shouldn't buy high. For me, I don't ever buy too high. Okay, that's just because I'm very conservative. But you want to buy high or sell low, that's definitely fine, as long as there's another sucker who willing to buy even higher than you, or even selling even lower than you. Okay, so it is a sort of like a zero-sum game. You can buy high as long as you know there are another peaks waiting to be slaughtered. Now, is that the case for Bitcoin? I don't know. Let's take a look at a chart. If you look at this chart, it's just a 4-hour chart. Bitcoin right now is at $214. It's crazy, right? Just, I think back in November, look at that. We are still at 5,000 area, right? We touched down to the lowest November 12th at 5555, and right now we are at 8,000. Wow. This is Bitcoin to dollar. So obviously you couldn't really see a crash. So let's zoom out to daily. If you zoom out to daily, it looks like a very steep uptrend, but I still wouldn't say it's too worried, right? If you zoom out to week, okay, now you start seeing a very steep uptrend. Now, if you zoom out to month, now it does look like what do we saw here? The 3 right here. Okay, so remember, this is the tulip bubble, South Sea Company, Dow Jones, and Bitcoin. Okay, so does that mean Bitcoin will crash? Honestly, the answer is I don't know, because who knows if it's going to crash or not. The most important lesson is that even if it's going to crash, you don't know when it's going to happen, right? You don't ever underestimate the length of the bubble, because the bubbles can go on way longer than your pocket. Okay, that means a lot of people trying to short sell the market when it's a bubble. The thing about short selling, and you might hear people, from beginning trading saying that you should never short sell the market because it's very risky. There's a partial truth to that, is because there is a limit potential for a stock to drop, right? What's the lowest number that any single stocks can drop to? It's 0. Okay, so if you're buying at $5, you know you're gonna lose that $5. If you're buying at $1,000, you know you're gonna lose that $1,000. Okay, that's the downside. What's the upside? The upside is infinite, right? Mathematically speaking, you never know how high a stock can go. So that's why when you short sell a stock or a financial instrument, your risk, theoretically, your risk is infinite. And that's why if you are trying to short sell a bubble, it's very dangerous because you don't know when it's gonna end. And trust me that the bubble can go way longer than your pocket. Okay, that means you're gonna run out of the cash before the bubble ends, and you definitely don't want to cut up in that. So even though it does look like a bubble, I wouldn't just jump in and sell it, because right now it's just a very strong momentum to keep going up. And again, I don't know if it's a bubble or not, right? All I show you is a comparison with history, right? This is 1637, so it's about 400 years ago, right? 355, 400 years ago, 1700, 1900. So just take a look at that, right? Take a look at that, you know that, okay, at least we know right now people are very enthusiastic about buying the Bitcoin. Okay, that's the only thing we know, and that's the only thing for sure. We don't know when it's gonna crash. We don't know if it's even going to crash or not, right? I don't want to make any statement here. There's a lot of Bitcoin believer that are making a lot of logic sense. So we don't know when it's gonna happen or not. Okay, that's the first thing, just to show you. And again, if you're interested to know about financial crisis, definitely look at these books. It's a very, very wonderful read. And the second thing is, should you buy or not buy? Now that's a more interesting question, right? Because that's a more practical question. Should I buy or not? So let's go to a more short-term time frame. Now, first thing is this: when you're buying a thing, right, whatever asset you're buying, even if you are a technical trader, you need to understand what are you buying. So exactly what are you buying if you're buying the Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin, of course, it's a virtual currency. And a lot of people believe that Bitcoin is not a bubble is because the currency or the major currency that we're using right now, fiat currency, essentially it's a dead note, right? It's a note of liability. So, it goes back to the history of gold standard. So if you're interested in that, you can read the history. So basically back then, your money is worthwhile because you can exchange that to gold. But ever since we got off the gold standard, now your money is basically just a piece of paper. Whoever guaranteed that money is the government and the central bank. That means if you're buying, that's why US dollar is so much valuable in a lot of third world country, right? A lot of third world country, they rather use US dollar as a currency. It's because the government of the local government has a lot of political uncertainty. So people rather use something that's more stable. Okay, so that's why your money has value. Okay, that's just a very simple way to explain it. So Bitcoin, obviously there's no central currency, there's no government. So really it's a free market. It's really traded between buyer and seller. And that's something I love about it, right? It's a completely free market. You have no intervention whatsoever. However, that's also something that most government and most countries do not like about it, because they have no control. How are you going to, for example, tax on a Bitcoin? If you are running the government, you don't even know how the currency is going. You really have zero control. The reason the central banks of each country is so important and so dominant is because they have few tools. They can raise interest rate, lower interest rate. They can print the money, right? They can actually print the actual cash in order to control the financial market. Now, if you're trading these kind of virtual currencies, they really have no control. And that's why a lot of people, especially young people, really, really love it. It's really like a concept of Uber, basically. Like everybody has a car, you can drive, you can be a driver, you can be driven by. You don't need to have like a traffic control center to give you a license. You don't need to rely on the taxi union, things like that. But look at what happened to Uber. Already got banned in a lot of countries because people don't like this kind of concept. The currency is such a strong invisible hand for the government to control a lot of things. It's not only about the money, it's about your import and export. It's about trading, right? So think about if people stop using Japanese yen, how is Japan going to rely on the export business, right? If now the money is freely traded like a Bitcoin, how is the Abe economy going to work? So that's one of the biggest roadblock about Bitcoin, is that how the government is going to accept it. And for me, that's really the biggest warning sign for Bitcoin. Again, that's just the fundamental side of Bitcoin. People just want to know whether you should buy it or not. The question is very simple. It depends on how much money you can risk. Okay, it's really depends on your own personal situations. If you have money that is a disposable income and you want to sort of like play with it, then yes, I wouldn't against it, because it's better to do that than buying a lottery, to be honest with you, right? If you have money, you want to buy lottery, I would say it's better to buy Bitcoin, because at least these things, you have a certain pattern that you can draw and follow. At least this thing, you have a certain amount of buyer. It's more transparent. It's not like a lottery. It's just completely random, right? Bitcoin, you can actually play around with it. I'll give you a sample, right? Back then you have this drop. Of course, I generally don't like to do it because it's like, you're doing something after it happened. So, but just to show you, right, if you are just purely draw this kind of technical chart, you see very clearly there is a strong support at 38 and 50%, right? So back then when you have this huge drop at 6,000, 5,000 area, that's actually a very strong support. Now, if you have money, a disposable income on your side, you wanted to play around with it, yeah, why not? What's the worst gonna happen? You're gonna lose this $5,000. That's the worst is gonna happen. But what's the upside? Well, the upside can go over 10,000 or even like 20,000, right? You never know. A lot of people trying to guess the top. I strongly discourage you to do that because you never know when the top is gonna come and when the bottom is gonna come, right? It's a fool's game if you're really trying to do it. So again, also if you zoom in a monthly chart, you'll say, yeah, it does look like a big bubble, right? It does look like very a steep trend. But it can keep going to this 12,000. It can keep going up. You never know. So in the short run, if you want to trade it technically, just draw. Why do I say technically? Honestly, I don't even know how to trade it fundamentally. Again, there's no central bank. There is no financial news. There is no economic indicators about Bitcoin. So the best way really is just to really draw a simple trend line. That's really the best way for me to trade it. And again, if you have money to buy it, then yeah, watch out for this kind of support resistance zone, and then just buy it and then forget about it. To be honest, if you want to park your cash when you have a one-on-one risk-reward ratio, things like that, yeah, why not? The thing is that your risk-reward ratio is something you should consider. The first thing is your money management, right? You only want to play with Bitcoin with the money you are okay to lose, right? This is very, very important. Don't treat trading like anything else. There's no such thing as a sure thing. So if you want to sort of like a gamble around with this kind of a cryptocurrency, yes, you can do it, but do it with the money you can afford to lose. The second thing is, you can basically target a different risk-reward ratio and just have fun with it, right? Don't treat it so serious. People tell you what happened is that people trying to become a millionaire by Bitcoin. They're trying to go big, right? They think that you either go big or you go home. That's really not a good strategy to be rich, to become rich in any market, right? You want to have a very longevity of your financial life. So I personally, again, it's up to your own risk appetite, but I would never ever risk my money in Bitcoin unless it's something I'm comfortable to lose. But once again, if it's something you are able to lose, then yes, watch out for this kind of technical resistance and support. You can definitely play around with it. Do I think it's a bubble? It does look like a bubble by the technical pattern, but even if it's a bubble, the bubble can go on more longer than your pocket size. Okay, that's something you have to remember. The future of Bitcoin, like I say, I don't know, but I think fundamentally, if governments start to accepting Bitcoin, I know a lot of vendors already accepting Bitcoin, but I tell you what's going to happen is that if governments start to accepting it, for example, if you're able to pay your property tax with Bitcoin, well, that's a big advance. That means the government official start recognizing Bitcoin as a way of paying a payment to the government. If things like that happened, right, that is a very good fundamental news for the Bitcoin. But just to remember, the biggest roadblock for the Bitcoin is not the free market, it's the central government, right? Because once they open up for the Bitcoin, then they really have no control over this currency. And currency is such an important tool for the central banks to sort of, you can say manipulate it, or you can say they're trying to stabilize the market. Well, either way, it's a tool for them. But if it's a cryptocurrency like this, they have no control. So, whether they are willing to give up their power. I mean, again, just look at Uber, right? Look at how the taxi union or even just the traffic authority, are they willing to give up the control over this? I do like the idea, right? It's a completely free market, but whether it's gonna go up or not, it's really a big question mark. Now, another thing is that people trying to compare Bitcoin to gold, right? They were saying that Bitcoin is like gold. I do see a logic behind that, right? Because gold is not something you really use for transaction, for everyday life, but it's an appreciating asset, right? Especially when you have a very big financial crisis or just crisis in general in wartime, people do rely on gold. Is Bitcoin gonna become like gold? Again, that really depend on, you see, gold become very valuable for a few things. First is that gold is very stable, unlike other metals. Second is that gold has such a long history, like thousands of years of history, that people have been using gold for transactions or for money. Bitcoin is very, very new. So for Bitcoin to suddenly replace gold, it might happen, but you do need to give it more time before it can climb that status. So it's just a very, very new currency right now. So again, I guess to sum up is that, just to sum up the three things, is it a bubble? From technical pattern, it does look like a bubble. But again, a bubble can go longer than your pocket. So should you buy or not buy? It depends on how much money you have. If you have money sitting aside, I would say, yeah, why not? You can just, again, how do you buy? Just a simple technical term, right? Because a lot of people trying to break the Bitcoin code. They're trying to see how are you going to know when to buy or when not to buy. For me, I really don't like to complicate things, right? You can really just look at a chart. It's very clear that you do have this kind of technical support and resistance. And if you have extra cash, yeah, you can play around with it. And the third thing is the future of Bitcoin. Honestly, who knows, right? I don't think anyone knows. You have a lot of people trying to make predictions, and they may be right, they may be wrong. They all have their own logic behind it, which I find is very good, right? That's how the market works. You have different side of people trying to make a judgment. So the future of Bitcoin, I don't know what's the future, but all I know is that for Bitcoin to have a very grounded future, to have a more certainty, is that most government have to accept it as a real currency. Right, I know a lot of vendor already accept it, but you have to see whether major government is able to accept it as a way of payment. Okay, so just a quick daily recap, a daily lessons. Again, I have this thought just because I start getting a lot of people asking me about Bitcoin. So just, it caught my attention, right? I honestly, I never really pay much attention to it. But now, since so many people are asking me, so I do like to, just give you my 2 cents. Okay, hope you enjoy this daily quick lesson. Again, you can listen to all my video in audio version on SoundCloud. And hopefully I will get on a podcast on iTunes as well. I will let you know and share the link to you. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.